Our first speaker will be Bea. Bea is an organizer with Anakbayan USA. They are currently serving as the National Education Officer. They are a cultural worker, contributing their illustrations, writing, and music for the people. They are based in Los Angeles, where they organize the youth and students and migrant Filipinos to fight for their rights and welfare towards national democracy in the Philippines. So if you want to go ahead, Bea.
Hi, it's me, Bea. Thank you for the introduction and bio. Yeah, as Dion said, I am a national leader with Anakbayan USA, which is the comprehensive youth and student mass organization fighting for the rights and welfare of Filipinos abroad and back home towards national democracy and genuine liberation in the Philippines. I was also a delegate, a part of the BAYAN USA Peace Mission last year and was able to be, yeah, part of the investigation of the impacts of militarism in the local community of the land, with the escalating uh, war provocations between the U.S. and China, placing the Philippines in the crossfire. So my group. Or my team was able to visit the Cagayan Valley region, which was also featured in the documentary. Um, but yeah, for folks that don't know, Cagayan Valley is actually located in the northernmost part of the Philippines, on Luzon, and it's actually the closest region to mainland China and Taiwan, which makes it a very like strategic site for the U.S. military and the U.S. government to place like EDCA sites and to place more of like their military presence in that area. Also, just for context, this region is also very resource rich, similar to like the rest of the Philippines, very rich in like fish, rice, precious metals. There's a lot of like mining in the region. And, despite this, many people actually still live in poverty. Many of the children that we saw in the area were malnutritioned, and wages in this region are actually some of the lowest in the Philippines, as low as 300 pesos, which is about like 6 US dollars like a day. Um, and Since 2023, Cagayan Valley, given its like strategic like area, is actually where they put three of the four new EDCA sites, having just been added within the past like couple years. So yeah, what does just to add more context to like what was shown in the documentary from like my own personal experiences, in terms of what militarism looks like in the area. In Cagayan Valley, we visited a city or town called Santa Ana, which is in like the northeastern part of Luzon. And this is home to like the Camilo Osayas Naval Base, which is an EDCA site. Um, the base itself is pretty hidden, like behind like greenery and like gates. Our van like actually passed by, but we weren't able to really see inside because of like the gates and the trees. But just to quickly explain, like militarism is actually very normalized in this area. Locals weren't very surprised to see men and women in uniform every single day, since like the military is like present even outside of like the Balikatan war exercises. They would say that like soldiers would go out to like do their morning jog around the neighborhood and would like mingle with like the locals. And even like the Navy ships, they would like make their rounds and dock every couple hours, and people would just like go on the ship to take photos. It was just very normal to them. But some local business owners, when we had gone there, it was like a week after the Balikatan exercises last year. She did mention that there would be soldiers that would like march into the town with their vehicles, like she said about like in the thousands, and like they would be like bearing arms. So of course, like locals would still be, scared to see like such big machinery, seeing a lot of people with guns marching into like their town, right? Um, and then she also mentioned that soldiers would actually invite like local women onto like their base. Um, And even in the hotel that we stayed at in the area, there were also soldiers there staying there in their civilian clothes, but they're clearly soldiers with like the buzz haircut, etc. And they would be, yeah, they would be drinking, singing karaoke with local women, and their presence was just, yeah, they were very present in the area. Um, we also visited another part, more central, but still in the Cagayan Valley region, where there would be like reports of what was already mentioned too, like low flying planes, live fire exercises, and parachuting exercises. There was actually a fisherman that we had spoken to that he was actually asked to use his boat for like a parachuting exercise, and they only paid him um, like $400 in like um, US money to like use his boat for like the day. Which if you understand the context of fisher folk in the area, um, they require to fish every single day to survive. So even though like he was given compensation, it took away like a day of like fishing, right? And this is also something that was also reported with like the local fisher folk in the area is that the um, the loud machinery, the planes would actually drive away fish, and this is like not very or sorry, this is also like still connected to even our organizing here abroad, right? If people aren't able to make a livelihood in the Philippines, they are therefore like pushed to migrate abroad in search for like livelihood to provide for their families. Um, so yeah, there's a lot of impacts too on like the local economy and like the livelihood of like many fisher folk and peasants that need the fish so that they can like make a living. But the military and the militarism was actually driving away like their source of like livelihood. So even though it was normalized, it was very much like still affecting like their everyday lives and their opportunities to yeah, make a living every single day. Um, One thing too about like my group in Cagayan Valley, like I said, we there's three EDCA sites in Cagayan Valley. We were able to at least like visit or like pass by the one in Santa Ana, but we were actually able to set foot on one of the newer EDCA sites at Lalo Airport. That was also mentioned in the documentary. This was actually previously a commercial airport that was recently turned into an EDCA site. And my group and team was actually some of the first organizers to actually like set foot on like the EDCA site. And we were able to do so through like the strong like relationship building with the local community in the area too. And building with like the community members who would actually visit the EDCA site to like serve food, like work there, and like a local church community too that would visit the EDCA site to hold mass and like have prayers with like the soldiers. So we were luckily able to like actually, yeah, go onto Lalo Airport, which is an EDCA site, and heard from the actual like workers there of like what they saw when Balikatan was there the week before. Um, there would be reports of like they would park their like large military planes there. I don't know if folks are familiar, but like some that they reported were like the Chinook aircraft, Black Hawk, C-130, and like other like military helicopters. Um, and they also named various other troops, not just the U.S. troops there, like other foreign troops, like from Taiwan, Japan, Australia, all doing like joint training with the armed forces of the Philippines. Um, and yeah, at the time that we went there, Balikatan had already ended, so the airport was empty. But the folks who worked there also reported that like the soldiers would like camp out and have their tents like on the runway. They would, yeah, do their parachute exercises, live fire, and like a local family that we could actually talk to. Said that they could hear like the low flying planes every single day and would even hear like the live fire bullets. And This is like a major theme and like probably most of the testimonies that you'll hear from like the peace mission. But to the locals, to like Filipinos, although these are like quote war exercises or war games, um, it already felt like war was already there. And given also like the history of like the um, the local state forces or like the Philippine military also like conducting like air bombings and raids already in the area. This is not too far off from like their own actual like experiences of the attacks and the escalating like war and violence in the region. Um, so yeah, very grateful to have been able to like hear from the community members around the EDCA site and actually like be able to like step foot on one. In terms of like the different views of like the community on like these EDCA sites, although like for a majority that the militarism was like normalized, some of the other community members that we would talk to actually said that they were didn't know that like EDCA was there, and that like they didn't know what the true intentions or purpose of like military presence in their area would like why were they there in the first place. In addition to actually like talking to like local community members, we were also had the chance to interview and talk to like leaders of like local government units. So like we were able to talk to like local city governments and local provincial governments. And a common theme actually across these local government units is that they were actually kept blind of like the US's military presence and activities in the area. And yeah, and of the decision to actually have like EDCA sites there. They found out themselves through like the news instead of like the proper like venues for um, from like the other governments. So yeah, many of the people and including the government, the local government units are like kept blind of like the EDCA sites in the area. And then yeah, so I'm told to wrap up, but just wanted to like mention one more thing, like despite like the high levels of militarism in the region. There's actually a lot of resistance, and we've met many actually like organizers who have been, like I said, there's many like fisher folks and peasants in the area. We've met with local organizers that have been like conducting aid work and relief work, local organizing to the community in Cagayan due to like the many environmental crises and typhoons that are further exacerbated by militarism. And recently, actually, there has been like a wave of attacks against these activists in Cagayan Valley. Where they have been charged, trumped up charges of terrorism financing, of even like possession of illegal arms, which is like a pattern of the government trying to discredit our organizations and red tag organizations that are actually doing the work because of like the gross state neglect of the Philippine government, and just wanting to like uplift like they're called like the Cagayan Valley Six. If you want to, I think someone had dropped like the link already to their case, but seeing that the Balikatan exercises happening at these three EDCA sites in Cagayan Valley is like no coincidence, right? That there's also like heightened counterinsurgency and attacks on activists in the area as well, who have been doing like the painstaking work of like organizing and really providing the work that's needed that the Philippine government isn't giving them. So yeah, that'll wrap up my sharing. Thank you so much for letting me share my testimonial, and I'm sure we'll have more sharings in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bea. Um, it's really agitating hearing you speak on the experience, and also uplifting the struggles of those kasamas those organizers that we met ourselves and whom we wouldn't have known anything about the area, or we wouldn't have known much about the area without the painstaking work that they had actually done beforehand and the prep work that they had done with us. So yeah, our hearts are with us, and we really encourage folks to project the call of Hands Off the Cagayan Valley Six. Just another reminder before we move on to our next speaker is yeah, for folks to just ask questions. So send your questions to the person whose name is Question Taker. Um, and we can field questions afterwards. So yeah, moving on. Um, uh, uh, we're very grateful to have with us our next speaker, Beña. Beña is a disabled veteran and grassroots activist organizing for immigrants' rights, public education, and Chicanx self-determination across Southgate and East Los Angeles. They join us today to share about their own experiences during joint exercises like Balikatan. So everyone, please welcome Beña.
Hi, thank you for that, and thank you, BAYAN USA. This is a good opportunity. I'm glad that I'm able to share this with even some siblings that might be on this call. So awesome. I I'm I'm really grateful to be able to share some of my experience and to fill y'all in on, I guess, my perspective when it comes to this. This film was really informative to me. The perspective that the folks being interviewed were giving and providing seems like a very intricate piece of like my experience while in the military. So I served about 9 years in the military, got heavily injured, so medically retired. After uh, after leaving, like I'm really getting a stronger sense as to like what my real effect in the military was. Like I went for school, like I couldn't make it through school without getting my scholarship in the military. Like so many people who when they're being approached for recruiting are being offered these these opportunities. And I'm even aware of one of the Marines that I worked with came from the Philippines, and he was on a cruise ship, and a recruiter spotted him in San Diego and let him know, like, hey, if you'd like to get citizenship, this is a route. You can join the Marines and you can go this route to gain your citizenship. You'll even be earning it. They'll support you to make sure that you get it. And the reality is he really lucked out that like there were people that cared about him. I saw others who were recruited under the same guise and didn't get the same like supported treatment to gain citizenship. So that's just like for y'all to kind of be aware when it comes to like that recruiting side and how they do recruit. It is very predatory, and a lot of lives are said without any form of punishment or change. So I've had the privilege taking of going to different countries under different kinds of deployments. I was lucky enough not to experience wild amounts of damage that I wouldn't be able to remember these things, but the things that did really left an impression, a very lasting impression. I worked at the Balikatan exercise during 2012. The exercise is, thousands of military members, and that's from all the different services, and they're coming and swarming onto the islands for these exercises. So they're causing environmental damage everywhere that they are present. They're making sure that let's say, everything that they do is supposed to be beneficial and aid for the Philippines. And so if they're um, hiring trucks, right? They're going to be hiring a trucking firm in the Philippines, and they'll be getting the money, and that's a benefit. There's going to be food that's ordered, produce. Those things are a benefit to the Philippines. The problem ends up being when year after year it's the exact same company, same firm, same people, and some people are doing like double dipping. They were former sailors or former government officials working the same exercise, and they're Filipino. And if they're not politicians, they're just working in the government, they're handling the contracts. And so they'll have a contract, they'll even be working as the driver, and they'll let me know like, yeah, I have a contract, so I'm getting paid to do this and to arrange to do this, and also to be a sailor because I'm assigned to work here. So it's like kind of double dipping um, for certain individuals. So that was like at the level where I was at. But I imagine if I looked above the people who were being hired, they're doing the same thing. If they're not hiring their relative, they're probably literally hiring their own company. And doing doing that in any country just to basically to colonize in these different ways, you're creating like this power vacuum where certain people are always going to have the benefit of the US's presence. the benefit to more local populations or even the indigenous is supposed to be that we're sending troops to provide aid. We're trying to help people with like dental issues for about a month, or maybe 3 weeks, or maybe 2 weeks, or depends on if they just want to change the exercises. So they can have a dental clinic for a week, but then the rest of the year, that's all they got. There's no maintenance to maintain other people who may have like injuries. This also goes for like any of the different aid supports that they provide, whether it's to farmers, so they're providing a veterinary assistance, right? And make sure that you have whether it's cattle or livestock that needs to be inoculated so that they're protected, all these things, they'll provide all the information, they'll do all these things, but then they have zero resources to follow up and to continue these different things unless there was some large farm that is a major corporation and they just have that relationship already. But that's not what they're doing. They're going to local populations to win over, as like to use their phrasing, like to win over the hearts and minds. At the same time, they are making some folks happy by providing them what they refer to as fees, right? They're giving them maybe what was it, a few thousand pesos, which could be maybe a significant amount for them for about a month or maybe even a couple weeks. But they don't get to perform their work, so that doesn't get maintained. And it is a disruption beside the fact that there's no announcement for them. Like the payment was probably the announcement. I believe it happened according to the interview about 2 days after it began. And I have personal experience on other deployments where we would do training like this, but there's no notification by our government. We rely heavily on the government that is there. So the Philippines would have to be actually the Philippines government military would be the responsible entity to let the people know. But because it's the military, it's a little bit more um, it's a lot more callous. They're very patriotic when it comes to their military. I had the experience of seeing it's similar to like an award ceremony, but it's their closing ceremony. Their closing ceremony had, pomp and circumstance. It was at one of their, I want to say it was their main officer school. So their main officer school is a learning center where, different services from around the world will come and like, share information. And this is just people training other officers to do what the U.S. officers do. And they'll get maintenance. They'll definitely have more training over and over, year long. Maybe they'll even get different kinds of supports. But if if I just go out in town and ask anybody where I was working in Manila or Makati, because Makati was where all the officers were working out of. They're wearing we're all wearing business attire or whatever. We're in Makati, and they wanted to keep us away from next to Makati, from next to Manila, like these more suburban areas where it's a city. Like, those are the kind of places I actually like to go personally. Being restricted from it just made me go and explore. Like, okay, I'm gonna check this out because it sounds like BS. And it is what it is. They want to make it seem as if though there's danger so that they can make us like tourists and keep us in tourist areas. And it's part of our briefing. Briefing was something that I, was very focused on as my job while I was out there, and it made it so that I'm talking to so many different members of the military, different military forces, and then we're just converting them into like these certain types of tourists without having any awareness of like what's actually happening in the Philippines. So we generally don't have any like awareness of, even if I was an intelligence person and I'm providing intelligence based off of like, hi, I'm a dentist, just making sure that I'm checking the local population's teeth and making any small adjustments. But then they're having conversations, or maybe they're just even keeping tabs of like the population numbers, everything that they can get and squeeze out of any of those interactions. When it comes to information, we're all aware nowadays, especially on a computer. I mean, we're giving up info, but when you're there face to face and you're able to see on the ground stuff, um, you know, in a context where maybe internet isn't widely available, that's really valuable information. You know where the indigenous populations are in the hills. Like that was the conversation that I overheard, where it's like, oh yeah, they're collecting information on like where certain populations are because of threat levels are higher there. So this is something that's been happening. They've been collecting info and making sure that they're prepared for events like um, the siege. And so no, like that was something to me that I remember hearing about, but being able to see more of the evidence here really put it into perspective, like what was actually happening leading up to that siege. It was all preparation, and it's still preparation. I think for the most part, based off of what the U.S. government has been doing, we're aware that we're kind of losing allies in the Pacific, and to me, that's fine. Self-determination is very important, especially not just for me, but like the folks that I work with, Centro CSO, making sure that we're out there, we're letting people know like this is real information. You have military in the Philippines, and they're saying that they're doing all the Lord's work. They're pumping up their own crowds, their military forces. Um, and in reality, what's happening is it's an intelligence operation. It's preparing for war, and it's also just colonization. It's trying to take over as much of the Philippines as possible, where, kind of leaving off like where the Spaniards left off. Um, and it's another reason why I think, for at least for me, this will be one of the last few things I'll mention, is why I can at least I can relate to what is happening in the Philippines because of what has happened in places where my parents are from in Mexico. Um, my mother being indigenous and her history and learning about it, and also knowing that like it's difficult to learn about it because of events like this. Like, how difficult will it be for people in the future in the Philippines to know about what was going on before 2017? Like, that's going to be key for us to know and to be aware that the U.S. was there preparing as much as they'd like to say it's training. Um, it's it's something I'm looking forward to continuing to support when it comes to Bayan's mission. And so I appreciate y'all having me. I did just want to give a quick shout out for Centro CSO and the work that we do. I kind of skipped over that, but the work that we do revolves around us fighting in East Los Angeles and Boyle Heights for immigrants' rights, especially now where you know, everybody is at risk, it feels like. And at least that's what it's showing up on the news finally, where we have kids being deported. And so that's something that we're strongly fighting against, and will be out Día Internacional de los Trabajadores, May Day, out in East LA. I don't know that anybody's nearby, but if you're welcome to join us at Mariachi Plaza at 4:30. We'll be having a rally and marching. As part of Centro Suizo, we also have an education committee that we fight for free, accessible public education and high quality. And we also and we're also sorry, I lost track here. So police accountability. So we have our committee that really fights against the East Los Angeles Sheriff's Department and LAPD. The brutality that they've inflicted upon the community has been horrible. It's had affected families that we've supported and make sure that we're behind them 100% every time that they want to make sure that they're showing, hey, we're not scared of y'all and y'all need to pay because, LAFD gangs, go ahead and Google it if you guys are interested to know what we're dealing with, because when it comes down to it, that's their military presence in our neighborhoods. They don't look that different. They don't act different at all because they're the same people. they're the ones that couldn't make it into the military, or they left the military wishing they can do more damage to our people. And that's where they end up in law enforcement, unfortunately. So I really appreciate y'all. Yeah, if y'all have any questions for me or anything else too, I'll be free to take them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Beña. Your sharing was very informative and I think very enriching as a veteran. Um, and it's an important voice, I think, that we need to uplift more often, you know. Yeah, uh, we are fighting hard to protect our communities abroad, but also here, right? Our folks who are suffering and whose quality of life is only getting worse and worse, right? So, what could we do but organize, right? Um, yeah, so for the next section, we'll just move on to a few audience questions. For the first question, it's actually directed to Beña. And someone in the audience is asking, what advice do you have for talking to working class youth at community colleges being recruited by the military sector? Do you want to go ahead and take that, Beña?
Sure. When it comes to the recruiting aspect, it's very unique. I actually was a recruiter and I only recruited one person, and I'll let y'all know very quickly. He just had to do it. His father passed away, and it was like his dying wish, and it happened like the week before. There was nothing stopping me from like trying to stop this kid because that would have been my mission. I I joined recruiting as soon as I figured out what was going on. I just went through the steps and slowly fizzled out of not having to do it because it was it's something that they'll use anything. So keeping that in mind, if there's any population that's ever being addressed about this, it's hard to combat like the entire population. Having educational, like informative flyers, even just around the area, is something that's, something we don't think about. But being able to be organized and share information that way is probably the best. Where there's a flyer, sure, they show up, good, now you have them. But if it's direct one-on-one, those kind of interactions, hopefully you have a relationship. And if you do, then you'll actually be a little bit easier off having that kind of dialogue and opening the conversation. Reason why I say that is if there's someone they're interested in the military and you know enough to, feel for them and feel that maybe there's a reason that they want to and have to or must, um, then maybe it's support that they need. If that's something that we'd have to really consider, because if we're telling them like this career isn't for you, then what career is for them? Which is why I say that organizing is very important. If you're in an organization and that's where you're having that conversation, there are people around, those are resources, and any one of them, maybe they have the time or they know something that can guide them into a different direction. Having them one on one, I hope that it's maybe like a tighter relationship, and in that case, just make contact, find out what it is that they want to get out of it. And to be honest, this is a very strategic way to look at it. Marry that passion with something else if you're skilled enough to do it. Um, Lastly, it should have been first, probably. Ask yourself if you're the person who ought to do it. Like, are you the person who should talk this person out of joining the military, for instance, or even approach them at all? Like, are you that person? If not, you could be if you had a flyer, because that you can get to anybody. So that goes for that. If there's some detail specific that like a situation, I wouldn't mind addressing that. But I think the best thing to do is to realize that when folks are going into that direction, the recruiter is going to make them their best friend. Okay. If you're at least aware of that, um, you can maybe identify in if it's a friend that maybe they're going down the wrong path, and hopefully you can have that kind of conversation with them. Mostly because like if they're being duped by a recruiter that's saying like we're best friends, that's not true. They they don't care. They don't they'll sexually abuse their recruits. Okay, that's something to know. If they need to be shocked to understand like why this is such a terrible thing, is well, a certain percentage of recruiters, let's say it's less than 10%, but still a large portion, has sexually abused a candidate or a recruit or an actual Marine. And it's because of the position of influence and power that they're in. So you have some fuel. Hopefully that'll help.
Yeah, thank you so much, Beña. I definitely your points about the manipulation, but also just the dangling of people's benefits, their livelihoods in front of their faces, but only if they pick up a gun for the United States, right? I think that's a very important and key point. Um, yeah, for the last question of the evening, one of the audience members asked, this is directed towards BAYAN USA. Are there plans to build on the fact-finding mission in the future?
Yeah, I can take that. This is Andan with BAYAN USA. Definitely. The peace missions, like Dion mentioned in the beginning of our session today, started in 2014, and they happened almost yearly, of course, until the pandemic. And they had the objective of really investigating what was happening with US militarism, particularly in Mindanao. There's a lot of other parts to this documentary that we're not able to show today, including more of the historical background of repression and things. But Mindanao was the site of the so-called Second Front on the War on Terror. This was under Bush and then President Arroyo in the Philippines, and they made the Philippines the second front after 9/11. And so our missions built on that support and solidarity with the communities there. And so actually the visit that we did to Marawi last year was also a return for Bayan USA, a return to the area to show that that linkage never was cut, right? And so in terms of moving forward, we are planning to resume these peace missions regularly. This documentary is one of the biggest next steps to build upon the fact-finding mission because there are so many stories here, right? We only shared stories from four regions today, Centro Luzon, Ilocos, Cagayan Valley, and then the area around Marawi. But there's a lot more that we have to share. And so, the fundraising for the documentary would be a huge help in spreading the word about the campaign because like a lot of people said in the interviews themselves, there's a lot of folks who view the US military in a positive light. And that's by design, right? And that includes our community here as Filipinos in the US and many other people here in the US. And so getting that education out there, getting the stories of what's happening on the ground is super crucial for us in building upon this fact-finding mission so that the facts don't just remain facts on a piece of paper, but they can be transformed into action steps, right? And just to close, part of that action that we're calling for is to join this overall campaign, right? It's one thing to get educated, it's another thing to join a movement and take action and get organized, like Beña was saying. And so we do have a US Out of the Philippines campaign. We'll flash again the link of how to endorse the campaign. We have many organizations across the country that are with Bayan or allied with Bayan that are taking up the campaign, that have endorsed the campaign, and we encourage you all to do the same if you haven't already. There's really concrete work that we can do here in the US, especially in the US, right? Against the war machine. And so let's propel the fact-finding mission forward with the next series of fact-finding missions, but also the concrete work we can do here on the ground.
Yeah, thank you, Andan. Yeah, I hope as Andan was mentioning, right, reach out to your local Bayan reps and other folks in the National Democratic organizations if you're interested in participating in the next round of peace missions. So yeah, next slide, please. Um,
I can share about this, Dion. So before we close tonight, we have a lot of dedications to this documentary that we want to make for this documentary. One of them is for Tito Menjola, who unfortunately soon after we were there, no, in May, fell into a stroke. And so the um, interviews you heard from Tito Menjola about, what he was seeing in Centro Luzon was part of his last interviews. And so this is the reality of organizing in the Philippines now. Of course, the healthcare system is not great by design, again, because the Philippine government prioritizes other things like military spending over healthcare, over education, right? And so the stories that we carry forward in this Peace Mission documentary are ones that need to be told because the people might not be there the next time we go back. And so Tito Menjola passed away in October of last year. And so he's one of the people that we want to honor with this documentary, not just by remembering him, but continuing forward his work. So if we could just take a brief moment of silence before getting into the calls to action again. Thank you all. We have a phrase in a chant in the Philippines, Tuloy ang laban, which means continue the fight. And so I'll pass it back to Dion for those calls to action.
You know? Yeah, so our to close out, these are our calls to action. So again, if you or your organization has not endorsed the U.S. Out of the Philippines campaign, please follow the link and we'll reach out to you. Donate to the campaign. Right now we are at $130 for donations. So yeah, let's continue to get those numbers up. Even if you can only contribute like $2, $3, that will go a long way. Yeah, and then there is a tiny URL as well for a feedback form. It will be emailed out to people after the conclusion of this webinar. But yeah, we really encourage folks to fill it out and give their full feedback so that we can really get a sense of how we can sharpen the messaging and strengthen the education work that we are trying to do, and really, as Andan was mentioning, right, uplift the stories that that the people we met were so graciously able to share with us, right. We encourage folks to hold local screenings and discussion groups and get your community's input. And BAYAN USA will be providing a screening kit that will be emailed out shortly. Join, and then of course join us in demanding that the charges against the Cagayan Valley Six are dropped, right? So yeah, without further ado, thank you everyone for attending. We know that the experiences and the realities of war in the Philippines connect to our migration, right? So yeah, stay in touch with the developments for the future acts. And yeah, although the realities are worsening, and there's a lot of like ways that people are expressing how they are suffering more, their will to fight is also intensifying, right? More and more people are getting organized because their basic rights are being taken away. So let's take that fire and vigor as well, and imbue it in our organizing work here in the U.S. Right? Thanks again, everyone.